Welcome to the Texas Conflict Coach radio program. If you've ever experienced or engaged in destructive or unresolved conflict, then you know it leads to broken relationships, distrust, and damaging results. Our program will help you manage and resolve conflict effectively with strategies, valuable resources, and support. Since 2009, our radio program hosted guest experts from around the globe sharing their perspectives, experiences, and expertise while giving you food for thought. If you can't listen live, then download and listen to any of our 300-plus podcasts in our library at texasconflictcoach.com. So sit back, relax, or join the conversation every Tuesday evening, or tweet us at TXConflictCoach.
Well, good evening, everyone. Disputes have existed as long as there have been people. Ways to resolve disputes have also existed just as long. But now technology has made some of the oldest ways to resolve customer disputes new again and better than ever. In our episode, How to Resolve Customer Disputes in Today's World, learn how you can settle differences with other people or businesses without ever leaving your home, office, or business. Now, tonight I have with me is Mark Norych, and that's spelled Norych, and he manages the operations of Arbitration Resolution Services, Inc., and oversees the experienced litigators, judges, and magistrates who make up the panel of arbitrators. He is also responsible for managing the company's Arb-IT arbitration system. For more than 30 years, Mark has been involved in the collection, litigation, and arbitration of claims on behalf of insurance, car rental, and other major industries. He's also coordinated and supervised litigation on a national and global level. Now, Mark is a frequent lecturer and sought-after professional speaker. He has provided seminars and workshops at several Fortune 500 companies on topics ranging from best practices for corporate operations to specific topics related to federal and state regulations and laws and their effect on company models and procedures. Now, tonight we do have our chat room open at Blog Talk Radio, and that is simply www.blogtalkradio.com/Texas-conflict-coach. We also invite you to participate in our live Twitter feed, and we're using the hashtag tonight, TCC Radio. And we are also taking live callers, if you dare, to ask questions and comments about what Mark and I will be speaking about. Simply call 347-324-3591. Mark, I'm so glad that you're here with us tonight.
Thank you, Patty. It's really it's great to be here. I always enjoy talking about ways to resolve disputes and problems that people have in their everyday lives, and I thank you for the opportunity.
Well, you're welcome. You know, this whole month has been for us our series on customer complaints, whether they're the service industry, restaurant industry, every industry under the sun, and also how online dispute resolution has been around to help that. And certainly I was very surprised when you and I were speaking about your arbitration online system. So, you know, we've talked about arbitration on our program before, but let's just assume that people still are learning about the differences in different dispute resolution processes. So why don't we start with what is arbitration and why is this important to our listener to know and understand?
Okay. Arbitration is an alternative to traditional lawsuits in courts in resolving disputes that people have with other people, with businesses, companies. It basically involves it's like a private court system where a person is selected, or it could be a panel of three people, are selected to conduct a hearing. There's a process. Each company, wherever you go, the process may be slightly different, but it's a very, very much more informal process than a normal litigation. And so arbitration is a private way to resolve disputes.
Okay. So, and now, quickly, if you can, distinguish it from mediation, because people confuse that all the time. I was just in a mediation last week and they kept referring it to as arbitration, even though I kept saying we're in mediation. They think it's synonymous.
Right. There is a fundamental difference, obviously, between arbitration and mediation. Arbitration is a process that at the end a decision is rendered. There is a finite, a specific resolution. Mediation is an alternative, is a companion process very often to mediation, where the parties can get together. Now, in this day and age, and part of what we're talking about tonight is they can conduct mediations by telephone. Mediations can be conducted by video conferencing. But the bottom line is that a mediation is basically a settlement-oriented process where a person such as yourself would preside over a meeting of the parties. And the goal would be for the parties to come to a negotiated agreement amongst themselves so that an arbitrator or somebody doesn't dictate by a decision.
Okay,
so
very good.
That's the fundamental difference. But what your listeners should appreciate is that arbitration as a process has been around for centuries and centuries. It goes back to beyond times when there were courts or formal laws. And one of the most interesting things that I think people will find fascinating is that one of the founders of the United States, of our country, was such a strong supporter of arbitration that in his will he specifically stated that if there was anyone that was not happy with what was in the will, it should be referred to an arbitration process and not litigation. Very few people know that was in our first president, George Washington's will.
Wow, that's very interesting. Wow, all that long ago. Now, I didn't even know that either, so that's a very interesting piece of trivia there.
Yeah, it's really funny, yeah.
So this is very good historically, and so I'm glad that. But so today's focus, and people know from listening to the show that there's many different types of dispute resolution processes. Mediation we've talked about a number of times. Arbitration we have talked about not as much, but the focus tonight, and correct me if I'm wrong, will be the arbitration process that you use online. So anything more that you want to say before we move on?
No. I think that people should just appreciate that one of the goals of an arbitration, and arbitration is in a category called of the world called ADR. Briefly, it's alternative dispute resolution. It's the alternative to traditional litigation, which many people refer to as civilized warfare. That's at least in the legal community. People think of litigation as civilized warfare. So arbitration is the alternative. The goal for arbitration is hopefully to create a process that effectively minimizes the anxiety and the tension that people go through when they are involved in disputes.
So really making arbitration accessible to everyone, so they're not engaged in this civil warfare, if you will. So let's talk about them, because we're talking about customers and businesses, customer complaints. How do we make dispute resolution tools such as arbitration accessible to everyone, so that you, like you said, creating a process to minimize anxiety and the pain that goes with civilized warfare? How do we make this accessible to everyone?
The first and foremost thing we do is remove from the dispute resolution process the need to physically appear at a specific location or to confront or be near the person, the company, that you're having a dispute or a problem with. Very often that interaction creates so much anxiety that it actually hurts the settlement process rather than helps. So what we need to do is create, and what we do at Arbitration Resolution Services is create a process where parties do not have to go anywhere to a dispute. They could participate from their home, from their office, from their business. They don't have to be confronted in person with anyone. And that makes the process much more user-friendly and easier to deal with.
So say more a little bit about how that works. Can you give us an example as you're talking about this?
Sure. If somebody were to have a problem with a local business or company, and the types of problems that are good to be resolved through arbitration are as varied as they are for lawsuits. Virtually any dispute that you could resolve through litigation, you could resolve through arbitration, and to almost the same extent, perhaps mediation. The way it normally is started is a party that's upset with, again, either an individual or consumer is upset with something they purchased online, or is unhappy with something that they bought at a local store. Could be anything from a car, a used car, a new car, to an appliance. They would go online to, let's say, our website, and they would file an application. It's a form. And one of the things in making the process friendlier is that, for example, ARS notifies the parties directly. We don't require, in a traditional litigation or a traditional dispute resolution, the parties have to have a lot of interaction. Okay. And we remove that from the process. ARS notifies each party directly. So there is very little, if any, direct communication in the process, unless the parties would like to have either, and it's their choice, a mediation before there's an arbitration here. And so the parties have total freedom, whether they want to be involved at all together, or there are many, many instances where the parties feel that the papers that they submit, the evidence, the proof of what they're saying, is clear enough that they don't have anything to say or add, so that there is no formal hearing. That all of the papers by both parties are submitted, and an arbitrator reviews all of the papers, which is called evidence, proof. It's proof of what you're saying, and renders a decision. So we give the parties total flexibility, and that's a key to the process that we use. The parties, the person that feels they were hurt or is owed some type of compensation would be called the applicant. The other party is referred to as the respondent. And each has an opportunity to present their side of the story, if you will.
Okay.
So
at this point, the applicant who feels hurt or caused some kind of damage gets to go online, fill out a form. ARS reaches out to the other the party, which is the respondent in this case. One of the objectives is that, one, they can do it from anywhere, meaning in their own home on a computer. And then they have the flexibility and the freedom, as you said, to not engage by sending the proof, and I'm sure there's various ways that proof, receipts, whatever that might be, and they upload it. And then at that point, you're contacting, ARS is contacting the respondent, and is this a thing that the respondent gets to choose as well to participate in, or?
Yes, the respondent, both the respondent and the applicant, do have the ability to request a hearing, or, depending on the amount involved, request a mediation. If they and mediation is a great tool. The problem with sometimes mediations are when they're held in isolation. By that I mean where you have parties requesting mediation, but there has been no lawsuit filed or no arbitration filed. If the mediation doesn't result in a settlement, the parties have to go back to square one, back to the beginning of something else, another process. With ARS, the parties can choose to have a mediation, and if a resolution isn't reached, if they don't reach an agreement, the matter gets scheduled for an arbitration hearing if they want a hearing, or just to have a decision rendered.
Okay.
So
and is that decision legally binding decision?
Yes, absolutely.
And is
absolutely.
it appealable? So if the applicant lost or the respondent lost, is it appealable or is it a final?
Well, that's a really good question. And with ARS, we do provide for an appeal process, but only on the basis that the arbitrator's decision was wrong based on the law. In other words, they applied the wrong law, or they applied the right law, but they applied it incorrectly. The standard that we use to allow appeals is exactly the same as actually with the courts. The parties can't challenge if an arbitrator makes a finding of fact. Whatever the facts that the arbitrator determines, that stays with the case. That can't be appealed.
Gotcha.
And that's because the arbitrator is the best party to review the evidence.
Okay, very good. All right, so I'm just going to let listeners know that you're tuned in to the Texas Conflict Coach Blog Talk Radio program, and we're talking with Mark Norych with Arbitration Resolution Services, very specific to consumer complaints and how they are using arbitration, and oftentimes the flexibility that's offered to participants for mediation or a specific face-to-face arbitration hearing, but the idea is to provide arbitration to anyone, anywhere, to make it accessible, essentially, so that people don't have to show up face-to-face. And that one of the benefits is that ARS really kind of coordinates that and giving the parties the total freedom and how much they want to engage, and that once the proof is uploaded. Now, do you use a special system or way in which people upload proof? Is there anything about that you want people to know about as a benefit?
We have the program we use is as you mentioned earlier on. It's called Arb-IT. It's a program that we developed and designed, and it is very, very simple and easy for people to upload evidence. Now, when we talk about technology, evidence, which is proof, if people don't understand what we're talking about, it's how you prove your case. That's called evidence. And now with today's technology, you can submit as evidence any type of video, audio if you took a video with your cell phone, if you have an audio recording, in addition to traditional photographs and documents which can be uploaded easily. Now in this world today, you can submit videos. You could submit if you're at an accident and you're taping somebody who is explaining what happened. You can use that as evidence. One of the benefits of arbitration over litigation is there are what are called relaxed rules of evidence, and that means that courts have very, very, very structured guidelines for what you could put in to prove your case, the types of things. Arbitration has a much more relaxed approach, so you're able to prove what you're saying in a lot more ways. It's a lot easier. Now,
tell us about. Let me just clarify something first, because one of the biggest goals is to make dispute resolution tools, your arbitration in particular, accessible to everybody. So, me in Texas and you're in Florida, I have a complaint in Texas. So anyone in the United States in particular, now we do have a global audience, so you might have a global reach as well, but anyone that has a complaint can choose to go to your website, Arbitration Resolution Services, and file a complaint, and I'm sure there's some type of a fee involved, and use this service so that they don't. In other words, you don't have to have approved businesses that have bought into your service, and so the business says, "Oh, you got a complaint? Go to Arbitration Resolution Services." It can go either way. Is that right? Just clarify that.
That's absolutely correct. Arbitration Resolution Services does not have members. It does not have people that have to join. You do have to register as a user, and there's no fee. There's no cost to simply register to be a user and take advantage of what we offer. And if anyone were to take the time and go to the company's website and you look at the fees, the fee structure is obscenely low. It's small. It's less than dinner for two people usually, or three people. So we're providing the state-of-the-art dispute resolution services at a fraction of the cost of litigation or any other companies. It's making it available to the masses.
Okay, very good.
So that's
and
what
is
we're
there a
excited
dollar?
about.
Is there a dollar amount that you that either is a minimum or a maximum? So if someone said, "I have a $50 complaint" versus a $50,000 complaint. Is there a range in which y'all work within?
We do not have any minimum. It really is a function of, we do have initial filing fees, and so the parties have to look and see what our filing fees are. In the business and individual program, I think the filing fee is $95. So you may not want to arbitrate a $50 dispute.
Right.
We do not have a cap on the amount of the dispute. Parties can come to ARS with a dispute, whether it's 1,000, 100,000, or whatever amount. Our panel is experienced enough to handle virtually any type of dispute with whatever complexity level.
So let's and anywhere in the United States?
That's correct. Anywhere in the United States.
So they can be in Alaska and use your system located in Florida.
Absolutely. Well, the company is headquartered in Florida, but we have arbitrators throughout the country, and we have arbitrated everywhere from California to throughout the country.
Okay,
so
good.
That's the beauty of it.
So very global, or very, and do you do global as well, or is it primarily in the United States?
Right now, it is primarily in the United States, but we are looking at expanding to other countries.
Okay, very good. All right, so what are some of the common service industries that that are common through your system? What are, you mentioned like used car sale, do we know about that, right?
Right.
Or the dry cleaner, loses our fur coat, or so what are some of the typical service industries that you're experiencing through ARS?
Interestingly, we've had a number of situations where there have been disputes with wills and trusts. Very often, parents, set up trusts for the benefit of their children. And what we have found is that there are a number of situations where brothers and sisters don't get along, and that has led to a number of arbitrations that are being filed, simply involving wills and trusts that were set up. We have a lot of landlord and tenant disputes that are filed. It's because we focus on generally the lower dollar claims under $50,000. We're dealing with a lot of individuals and small businesses, and because they don't have to be somewhere at a specific time to be involved, it makes the process very accessible and easy. And so we get all of these disputes that would ordinarily fall through the cracks or people would walk away from them. So we do have the cars, we have wills, you name the disputes, from landlord-tenant, it's just contractors. We have a lot of disputes where people hire contractors to come to their home.
That's
or
a
their
nightmare
apartment.
right there.
Oh, well, that's the funny thing is if you can get the contractor to your house. How many times have you waited for a plumber or an electrician or a handy person, a handyman, and no one shows up? So
yes.
you got to be fortunate that they show up. Then you got the problem with what they do. But
so let's take that example. There's a lot of contractors out there who have subcontractors and all that for your home, right? That's a very typical service industry that has lots of problems. And homeowner says, look, I gave them 50% of my money. They showed up the first day. Everything is torn up, and I haven't seen them in 3 weeks. And I'm going to use ARS, and they show their contract, and they show their deposit, and they show all this proof. And then you try to reach out to contractor, and contractor wants nothing to do with it. What happens? Do you have that occurrence where they won't even engage in the arbitration process, or do they even have it? Because on one hand, you're saying they have total freedom to engage, but what if the respondent doesn't respond?
Well, the basis for anything involving these kind of disputes that are agreement-based is that there has to be a provision in an agreement that says in the event of a dispute that the parties will agree to use arbitration. It may or may not specifically name Arbitration Resolution Services, or just simply say will agree to be bound by a decision rendered in arbitration. Mm-hmm. That's the basis for everything. If you don't, there was one of the tips that I wanted to get across to everybody is that, and it's very important for your listeners to understand that they must always have a written agreement or a document. Verbal agreements are not worth the paper they're written on. And this is really important. When somebody says, a contractor or whoever, oh yes, it'll clean that, or I'll fix this, or I'll do that. Words are only as are good as if they're written down, because then how do you prove that they were said? So it's really very important. The first thing that everybody listening should understand is when you're getting involved in buying a product or hiring a service contractor or somebody to clean your floors or to paint your walls, you need to have it in writing, have a written agreement as to what they're going to do for the exact amount. That is the most important thing that I can impress upon anybody. Handshakes, don't do anything.
Yeah, because even if they're, your best neighbor who said, this person is the best person, I recommend them, and notoriously that person comes over and does not do the same quality job, all of a sudden you're in a real bind. But what I'm also hearing you say, in addition to having this written agreement that outlines, what exactly are we doing, the exact amount, things of that nature, you're also saying, because I see a lot of agreements that don't have this, which is what happens if we're in a dispute, and putting in there what dispute resolution process. It could be dispute resolution or arbitration specifically or mediation, but that there's so if someone has the arbitration, then of course that clause in their agreement, then certainly they would be able to use you. So does the respondent have a choice? Let's go with that. Contract has the arbitration dispute clause in it. Applicant says he agreed, she agreed. I'm now filing Arbitration Resolution Service for an arbitration. I don't want a hearing, I don't want a mediation, and the respondent still does not respond to you, ARS. What happens at that point?
If the agreement has a provision for arbitration in it, and the other party ignores it, they are running the risk of actually having an award rendered against them, which would be enforceable.
Okay, so that's important to know as well for those who are on the other end, especially if they're a business, that they have to understand that they're going to be still legally legally responsible if the arbitration decision is made against them. What are some other tips? Because this was a perfect segue, with all that you have done and your expertise in there. What are some additional tips in dealing with disputes, especially as a customer who might be dealing with the retail or service industry? So having a written agreement, having this arbitration type of clause. What else do you have?
Okay. That's the first and foremost, obviously, is the agreement and a provision as to what to do in the event of a dispute. The second thing that I would recommend that, and I am notoriously bad at myself, which is why I'm recommending everybody else do it, is whether you're buying a product or whether you're hiring somebody, have either a folder in your house where you file every document, whether it's a manual for an appliance or the receipt from the store or the order, the contractor gives you when you hire them to paint, and they give you a work order. Have a place where you put everything. That is that becomes your Bible. And if you are technically savvy enough, then scan it and keep it in a folder electronically. But one of the biggest problems that I see, and I've always been involved in, is that parties, once they buy a refrigerator or they buy something, the receipt disappears a week or a month later. And very often problems don't happen for a year, maybe 2 years. But a refrigerator, for example, should last 10 years or more, or 15. Mm-hmm. But you don't have any proof. Or if there is a malfunction and your toaster burns up, how do you prove you bought a toaster, what toaster it was, or the model? Mm-hmm. And so what happens is the toaster goes poof, and you're trying to hold somebody responsible, and you don't have any proof. Why? Because the proof was burned up. Mm. So the second rule, after having an agreement, the second thing, all receipts, keep the manuals, keep everything. And if you want to do, one of the things I suggest is by year. Just buy it's only $10 or $15 each year. You buy for each year, and they come with alphabet tabs. So this way, you have appliances, you have lawn service, you have plumbers, and you could just put receipts in there, wherever they are. And then the last, the recommendation I would make is that you, in the event there is a problem, something happens, take photos, video the event, talk to people, get statements. At the time it happens, it is always more difficult to recreate than preserve. Okay. So if you take photos and you do things at the time of something develops, it'll be much easier for you later to prove what happened.
Okay, so very, very good. All right, so those are some excellent tips. And let me just say one just on a personal note regarding the keeping the receipts. I had a very similar situation, appliance. 2 years later, I went to go get the receipt out of my safe, had it with my manual. I'm very organized, so I do have that down. But the type of technology or ink that they use on those receipts, they fade away completely.
Fade over time.
And so now what I've been doing, so here's another tip just for organization-wise, is I now make a copy of the receipt, attach the original to the copy, because then I know 2 years later I can still read the copy because the original receipt is almost like invisible ink. It's gone. I don't know if you've experienced that or not.
All too often have I gone to look at a receipt, and I'm holding it up to the light to see if I can see an image, faded image. You are a poster child for a great client or a great party with what you're doing. That's ideal. I wish everyone I rep,
Yes, but like you say, this is something that we give tips to, and so sometimes it's really hard for us to apply that for yourself. And so I know that we're getting ready to give an assignment for the week. So maybe one of your assignments is start to copy your receipts and create that folder for yourself. We're still in the new year, Mark. So you had those New Year resolutions.
Right.
That's your New Year resolution.
There you go. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I have a new resolution.
All right. So number of tips. So we're going to move into the closing piece, but before that, is there any other burning tips that you really want to share at this point?
Well, there's one thing that I think everyone should understand about arbitration, and it's an unbelievably useful piece of information. That is that arbitrations are private procedures. They're private in that No one else knows that you are involved in a dispute. This benefits individuals and consumers as well as businesses. When you have lawsuits, guess what? They're a matter of public record. They may very well affect your credit reports. If you're involved in a litigation and you're listed as a party, that will appear in a credit report. When you are involved in an arbitration, it is totally private and is not discoverable by any of the credit bureaus. So that's an obscenely great benefit to being involved in arbitration over litigation. Nobody knows your business.
Okay, that's another great benefit and absolutely of understanding, because I think sometimes people also, not only do they confuse mediation and arbitration, but oftentimes they think of arbitration as this long, drawn-out, very legal proceeding, so sometimes they're like, well, isn't it just as bad as litigation? And so what you've done is really to try to, eliminate some of those myths and talk about the real benefits of the flexibility and the privacy of it.
Patty, if I just may say, we had a situation that went from a consumer who bought a used car and they were unhappy. They went from the time they filed the application through an appeal process in 4 months. We're not necessarily looking. You're right. This is not your traditional litigation or even arbitration. You can have these things resolved in months and weeks and months, not months and years. Okay,
and that's a good point, because litigation will often take years and many, 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 many dollars that many of us don't, can't afford. So. All right, so we usually give our listeners either an assignment for the week or a call to action to take the next step. So what is the next step you have for them?
Oh, I think that what your listeners should do, just to see how diverse and how arbitration is involved, is to go to see if you can research by the end of the week, 5 decisions involving arbitration with famous people that have occurred in the last year.
Okay.
Or I'll even stretch it to 2 years. And it does not have to be in the entertainment world. It could be in the sports world. It could be in any well-known personality.
So it should be on Google. They could just certainly research arbitration award, famous people, something of that nature, to find out who that. Do you have an example of one recently?
Sure. Last year, Donald Trump won an arbitration award against a contestant who said not nice things about the Miss America pageant, and in their agreements they provide for arbitration. And he won a $5 million, I believe it was a $5 million award against one of the contestants.
Now, so that's a really big one. I mean, Donald Trump's in the news all the time, and so that would be a very famous person. And in this case, he won.
That's right.
Against Miss America, and of course he, has been running that for a while. If folks find this research, do you want them to engage with you in any way about, just their,
anyone
listening? How would they reach you?
Anyone is welcome at any point to give me a call. My number is 888-934-1777. Or you can email me at mnorych, Norych, at Arb, A-R-B, Resolutions, one word, RESOLUTIONS.com. I will gladly go over any situations you have and you're dealing with, and hopefully be able to help you out and point you in the right direction.
Okay, great. And then your website is arbresolutions.com, just like the back end of your email. So RESOLUTIONS.com. And folks that are listening, as you know, we have program pages for each of our guests that stay up for eternity. So you can access all of the information, including Mark's website, in addition to sharing this episode with all your people in your social networks, through Twitter or Google Plus or all the things that are out there to share and let people know, because this is all about educating people. And I'm really glad that you did that and gave some really practical examples where everyday consumers can access, something as simple as the arbitration to really assist them and not feel like they have to go through this long, like you said, civilized warfare of litigation, that they don't have to feel defeated before they even get started, that they do have this access, arbitration access to them in a very easy way. So I want to thank you so much for coming on and educating our listeners around the world about Arbitration Resolution Services and your complete online dispute resolution.
It was, Patty, once again, thank you very much. It was my pleasure, and enjoyed the opportunity to speak with you.
Okay, no problem. And any final messages for you?
Yeah, I want everyone to just appreciate that disputes and problems can be resolved in a friendly and civilized way where people to a dispute can still maintain relationships if they want to after the problem is solved.
Great. All right. Thank you, Mark, and thank everyone for tuning in, and thank you, guests, for being in the chat room. Good night.
Thank you for listening to the Texas Conflict Coach. We hope you've enjoyed the program. You can find over 300 podcasts archived to listen at your own convenience at texasconflictcoach.com or download the podcast at iTunes or Stitcher Radio. To learn about upcoming radio programs and resources, sign up for our monthly e-newsletter.